my first order of business today is to talk about what is syntax and why teach it. And of course, everybody knows the rope, I'm sure. But what would a webinar on reading and writing be without a picture of the rope? So we have the simple view depicted with this rope, although that wasn't Hollis Scarborough's intention, but we see word recognition, or the D part of the simple view at the bottom. The top, we see the LC, or the language comprehension. And this is where we're going to focus our attention today, on these language structures here, where we see syntax and semantics in the same strand, because they really go together. You can't really talk about one without the other, although we're going to focus specifically on syntax today. And if you haven't seen this, this slide before, something like it, we could think about students that have good language comprehension, but weak decoding, right? And these students are students that are often considered dyslexic. We have sort of the opposite profile where kids have weak language comprehension, but good decoding. And these are students that might be considered having developmental language disability or disorder. They can read those words beautifully, but they have trouble with language comprehension. And then we have kids that are weak in both areas. And we have to really think about these three profiles. Fourth profile, we don't have to think about too much because those students are good to go in both domains. But we want to think about these profiles because it speaks to the importance of differentiated instruction. And one size can't fit all. We can't give everybody that struggles the same thing. So the students with phonologically based reading difficulties, i.e. those students that are identified with dyslexia, are going to work specifically on word recognition skills. Students with language comprehension reading difficulties are going to focus on oral language and vocabulary. And those students who have difficulties with both need all of it. This comes from Louise Spear-Swirling's The Power of RTI and Reading Profiles. I also like to show this slide because it really speaks to the importance of differentiation, differentiated instruction, and shows us here systematically designed and data informed. But it's going to look different, right? That instruction is going to look different depending on which of these bands of students that we're talking about. The students in the bottom two bands really need a comprehensive analytical approach to learning language structure, what we might call structured literacy. The students in the top band don't need as much of that. They might need it for spelling and writing, which I always talk about. Actually, they all benefit from explicit instruction in spelling and writing. But these students in the top two bands seem to have much better, much higher and more proficient reading, certainly reading in general. And so if we go back to this idea of students that have word recognition difficulties, the Reading League published their defining guide a couple of years ago and gave examples of instructional practices that are aligned with the science. And certainly we know these students need to read connected text to build automaticity, fluency, and comprehension. And in here, by the way, is syntax, sentence comprehension, which we'll talk a lot about today. We do not emphasize speed or words per minute, right? And I will also go back to that idea. We don't want to do that. That's a practice not supported by evidence. Now, if we think about the students that need more of the language comprehension focus, some examples of practices that are aligned are explicit instruction in grammatical structures and academic vocabulary within the context of other reading activities, right? And not supported are implicit instruction of grammatical structures. These students with language comprehension difficulties will not figure out syntax unless they have explicit instruction that we're going to talk about today. I always like to also share our reading wheel because the reading wheel is really our graphic organizer, if you will, to show all of the domains of reading that were identified initially by the National Reading Panel in 2000, with the addition of spelling here, with the addition of morphology here, with the addition of written expression here, with this at the center. And I will talk more about that because it's very important when we're talking about building language comprehension skills. But what you'll notice is our original wheel had fluency here, and that's because we wanted to represent the 5 pillars from the National Reading Panel. But to that earlier point, we saw a lot of teachers getting kids to read fast, and they were losing sight of what was the really most important thing about having kids read fluently. It's to comprehend the text, not to read fast. It's not a race. Kids who have slow processing speed are not going to be able to read fast. And it's okay. It doesn't matter as long as they're making meaning. So we replaced fluency with syntax. And you'll sort of see, I hope, why we did that and what we feel we get out of replacing syntax, because we're going to still talk about fluency, and you're going to hear me talk about it a lot today. Fluency is absolutely critically important, but we don't think of it the same way as some of these other big ideas. Reading fluency or fluency of anything is really about automaticity. So it's not like phonemic awareness or phonics. It's not conceptually the same thing. This is a QR code, by the way, if you want to just go to our website, and it will take you there. And there's lots more information about all of this.